So if you're just joining us now, you are now going to have the wonderful Aleyda, Paul and David take you on a journey to the worst technical SEO nightmares and how to end them. I think this is going to be a really fun session. While guys, yeah, I know, really scary. While the guys are introducing themselves, please use the chat to drop in any questions or just let us know where you're calling from, where you're dialing in from, and we'll say hi.
Hello.
Nice. Guys, if you want to introduce yourself first, and then Aleyda can introduce herself and jump straight into the deck.
I'll start since I'm on the left. Hi, everyone. Paul Shapiro. I lead technical SEO for Condé Nast and all the Condé Nast brands. So that's such publications such as GQ, Vogue, Wired, New Yorker. Some people may have heard of them. I founded the first technical SEO conference in the US, Tech SEO Boost, and still involved with that. When the pandemic is over, we're certainly going to have a 2021 event. I'm from New Jersey. I'm in New Jersey too. And you know, I'm very happy to be here. You have some great presenters. Aleyda is amazing. I'm very excited.
Cheers. So I'm David Sayce. I'm a digital marketing and SEO consultant with PaperGecko, and I deal with all sorts of issues and been doing this since about 96, 97. So a few years of nightmares. So really looking forward to seeing this.
And well, finally, hello, everybody. My name is Aleyda Solis. I'm so very happy to be able to share with you a few nightmares, main nightmares that I'm sure that some of you have already also gone through, unfortunately. But ideally today, what we want to do is to be able to share some tips, some insights, inputs of how you can at least control those nightmares so they don't consume you. Right, like that is what is important. They will tend to happen from time to time, but we need to take control of them. And of course, I am an international SEO consultant. I have my own SEO consultancy that is called Oranti. I am also very active on Twitter. I am at Aleyda, in case you don't follow me. And I like to share what I learn and what I do in SEO. I have a newsletter that is called SEO FOMO. I also, not SEO MOFO, it's SEO FOMO. Please. I also have a video series that is called Crawlable Mondays, where I interview other SEOs across different areas too, different topics. And well, I'm very excited to be here today. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Aleyda. If you want to share your screen.
Perfect.
And we will dive straight in. Very
excited. Let's start. Please get prepared. Don't get too scared.
I'd love to put hands up in the chat as well if we go through anything that you yourself have also experienced.
Perfect. Yes, please do. And please do ask questions. You will see that I will be already sharing a few insights and tips. But if you still have any questions, the idea is that we can discuss afterwards different ways to handle this type of issues, right? So the worst technical SEO nightmares and how to end them, right? And literally, this is also known as how to avoid technical SEO fuck-ups that can send your work to the garbage and could end up also making you lose your job, which is the actual nightmare, right? And what we want to avoid, definitely. And the journey of technical SEO today can easily turn into an unexpected nightmare, unfortunately. And I have to say, like last year, I asked around over Twitter and I got a little bit more than 500 answers regarding which were the top causes of SEO failure, of SEO processes failure. And not so very shockingly, technical SEO resources availabilities and reliability issues was the top one issue. And the fourth one was technical flexibility issues, right? So we know that technical flexibility, resources, capacity are among those very persistent type of problems that we tend to come across in an SEO process on one hand. Then, on the other hand, we know that things have gotten more complex in the latest years with the popularization of JavaScript frameworks and also many new companies. And I have to say, like, I tend to work with whether very big brands or with startups that really need to grow very fast. And these tend to come from an app first type of world recently, and they tend to literally like start building their website after their app, and they tend again to use, they're very heavy with the JavaScript frameworks again. And even in last year, in one of the Google events for the search community, right, that they acknowledge and they share how the current status of search needs more technical oriented SEOs because of all of these layers of complexities, right? Like, and just to show you how real this is and how evident, and this is the trend of the crawlability of a website that I had been working already for a while, and I have been like meaning and recommending top one priority for a little while was to fix the crawlability by just enabling a main navigation that was following web standards, because literally the it's not only that they rely on client-side rendering in JavaScript, but the links were not implemented with href tags in the first place, right? And you can see the before and after. After they fixed that, take a look at how it ended up being. Like, it was a completely different matter, right? So I wanted to also check, though, when I feature those that I thought that were the main issues, if others thought the same, if others were seen the same in the SEO processes, right? So a couple of months ago, I also asked around over Twitter about which were the top SEO horror stories for everybody, right? And I have to say that probably 90% of those were technical, very technical oriented. So today, I will go through those most common technical SEO nightmares that I not only I have seen in my own scenarios, in my own projects, but people have confirmed that they tend to see again and again as the worst ones, right? So let's start with the classic ones, those that already have a small share in our mind every night, right? Like web migrations, right? And don't worry, because I will share in a lot of resources and tools, right, and data, and I will be sharing the deck afterwards. So don't worry about taking notes, because I will tend to go a little bit fast across a few of them, right? But yes, web migrations, they can go very wrong. And literally, there's a thing, very big brands even tend to implement migrations like this, right? And then they go wrong. Funnily enough, it was like a few months ago when I was talking about SEO for e-commerce website. I was featuring Nostrom's navigation as something that you need to avoid, because they were internally linking to the top categories and some facets and main navigation, literally adding tagging the URLs, adding parameters to the URLs, I guess to tag or to monitor the behavior of the clicks. That can be done in many other ways, not necessarily events, for example, without relying on using parameters in the URLs. You really want to link to the actual indexable URL version, of course, especially in your main navigation. And then, so when I saw that they were migrating, for a moment, I said, oh my God, this is great, because, well, maybe they take the opportunity. And this is what you do, right? When you migrate, you tend to the opportunity to do many of those structural type of changes that you were not capable to do. You were waiting for a major change to do. But no, they didn't. And we can see here that before and after, not necessarily positive, I'm afraid. And not only major brands, like everybody, like sometimes we come across these scenarios in which, like, what can go wrong goes wrong. Like Mathieu here, it was like the after an international migration and many checks, disallow of new language directory, Googlebot UA, it was blocked, no follow links. URL parameters on each redirect URL, we canonical to the final URLs. A few days later, robots.txt updated blocking the same parameters. So many things can go wrong. It's crazy, right? this is another scenario that I thought it was interesting, because it was not the typical migration of the URL structure, web structure, or even design, but it was a server migration. And Jana here was telling that somehow they were relying on a plugin in their platform, that all of a sudden, just because of the server migration, the cache didn't refresh, and it made it literally to erroneously redirect and end up serving like a blank page every single time to the Google bot and the user too. So that can be quite scary. You will never thought that, okay, only a server migration, why things should fail, right? Like why you should get your SEO involved in the first place. Well, you do, right? Because these type of things happen. So to stop these horror stories and very scary ones, oh my God, if you haven't watched this movie, please don't watch it at night, because that can carry certainly a few nightmares. So I've created a checklist of Google Sheets that you can copy, of course. This is my checklist for the minimum viable SEO validation whenever a web migration happens, right? And also I have added some extra columns to the right with the status and dates and comments, because ideally this is the thing. We should do this very well before, when we need to do the migration, to be able to share it with all of the team members involved, with the stakeholders, and go through all of this. I have also shared many times one of those where acronym on these videos, how to recover from a web migration go wrong, because this tends to happen too. So with very specific prioritized tasks to go through all of these URLs that are not redirecting or not correctly redirecting to the indexable new version of each former page. And I also, last year, I shared some very handy SEO tools functionalities that really facilitate to identify web migrations gone wrong. So you can literally, if this happens to you, you don't waste your time. You go through all of these functionalities and just start validating in a very straightforward way, right? And this is the thing, it's not only with URLs or server migrations, even redesigns and structural web changes, we can see this type of issues, right? Yeah, sadly, take a look, when I was, this is very scary, right? Especially because a little bit of time had already passed by since the drop happened. Yeah, so you can literally lose everything. And Don here was sharing like a very sadly common situation. The dev team redirected every single vehicle page on an auto site to a lifestyle page with absolutely no words when reskinning a site. Needless to say, that didn't go very well. And this is the thing, I have found that sometimes this happens when pruning the site. Sometimes the web development team or some of the content team members also decide like, oh, very old content, nobody's reading it, no traffic, we can eliminate it. Oh, but they haven't noticed that they have like thousands of backlinks from back in the day. Or this is literally bringing non-trivial organic search rankings, right? Or referring to some of the most important pages internally, cross-linking to the website, right? And then Andrew Optimizer here, he also shared another very crazy horror story regarding removing content on the site. So for that, on the other hand, even if we don't think that this is necessarily a technical type of issue, it is, because you need to validate well what needs to show up for 10, what needs to 301 redirect, and where. And if the new page's destination, well, they are indexable, they are crawlable, they keep the relevance from the former page, if they will fulfill the intent or not. So yeah, it's not purely content. It has also a technical type of layer in this type of validation that is important to take into consideration very well. And for that, I have shared and created this flowchart in the past to go through different scenarios to facilitate the decision making of what to do with the pages, right? And realistically, and we are going to see in a bit that this happens again and again. This is a persistent issue. Many times, it's not because we don't know about this. We know about this stuff, many of us, right? Realistically, the issue is that sometimes, whether the stakeholders or the people who are in charge, they overlook SEO just because, or also because they are the decision makers, not the technical team, not the content team, but the decision makers our clients or our bosses, right? And they literally make some decisions because of the business or because of other type of reasoning beyond SEO, and they don't ask for SEO input, or they don't care about SEO input in the first place. So this is sort of the situation here that Claire shared. Well, when you are a franchisee and they have you as a subfolder of the main domain, right? And the head office, they decide to eliminate you right? No redirect, no anything. So what can you do? What it is important here is to understand that these things can happen. So whenever we see these situations like, oh, the SEO doesn't know about this, well, sometimes they do. And this is another scenario that, in fact, Ewan share about an e-commerce website, and I have been there myself, right? Removing their blog, removing informational content that because they are e-commerce, right? I went through this with a client, not with their blog, but with a lot of hub pages, informational pages that they didn't think that they will lose much, but realistically, these hub pages, they didn't only allow to rank and attract a very top of the funnel type of rankings, because they were ranking with very broad terms that maybe directly they don't bring transactional value, but they end up bringing much more authority, interaction with the user at the beginning of the customer journey, also referring or internal linking to this more transactional pages. So at the end of the day, they are removed, and not only their direct traffic is gone, but also a lot of the traffic, a good chunk of the traffic of the more transactional pages and what they were able to bring directly themselves, right? So this is the thing. It is fundamental that there's planning and alignment with stakeholders and decision makers before doing these changes, and it's critical and fundamental for success, right? And then another classic for SEO horror stories happened with international websites, in which unfortunately I have been also very involved, when automatically redirecting users and bots based on their IP locations again and again. I mean, I understand that there might be some edge cases here. So for example, if you have a Forex website and you literally cannot show some page to the US users, only to the European-based ones, for example, things like that. But they are very edge cases, right? But again and again, like I tend to see this, and then you don't only redirect the users coming from Spain, but also any Google bot that come to crawl your website that might come from this location. And this tends to happen across many websites, as you can see here. And it's literally, you lose your rankings because if you are, for example, redirecting your US users to only this domain, then most of the IPs that Google uses to crawl the web are still from the US, and maybe they will never see then your version for France or Germany because they don't crawl the web with French or German IPs, unfortunately, right? So it is important that we avoid these whole issues. Again and again, if you need to justify this decision, you can see like official recommendations from Google here, and even John Mueller here, about not doing this. On the other hand, what you can do is to suggest the best version for your users, as we can see here Adidas is doing, in a non-intrusive way, ideally, right? And then whenever the user actually selects their preferred version, you can personalize the redirect to that particular user via cookies, right? But this is a personalized type of redirect, not without doing that with a Google bot and with every single person, right? And then another very usual SEO horror story for international websites come with the usage of hreflang annotations that I don't know why or how, but it's crazy how they can go bad. So for example, here, it was Fabrizio sharing the other day, the hreflang annotation for the Stripe website. It's like literally they have gone like pretty crazy with the values that they use in their annotations, like ES419, which is supposed to be Spanish for Latin America, but literally like hreflang annotations, they don't support localizations like this. It is Spanish and that's it, Spanish, and then dash the country, literally. So this is very weird. Also SG, the Singapore is like, I don't think that they will attract a lot of Spanish speakers from Singapore. But anyway, so yeah, things can go very easily, very crazy with hreflang annotations, values, and mixes like this, right? Also, to me, is to point back reciprocal tags or specifying non-indexable URLs, URLs that are canonicalized to others or redirected to others, or literally showing errors or not that don't exist in this other version, language or country version in the first place. And before going beyond, right, like what we need to think about is the actual goal of hreflang annotations. Hreflang annotations serve to specify what are the alternates of a given page, right? The pages that exist in other languages and targeting to other countries, right? So, for example, in this particular case that I'm showing here, when I search for this Nike shoes here from the US, I should be able to see the US version. But something is happening here, and instead of seeing the US version, I see the GB, the UK version, I see the Luxembourg version, I see the Canadian version for this page, right? If it is because they don't have a US page for these shoes, then it's great. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing to fix. But if there is an actual US page for this particular shoes, this is what should be fixed here, and that is what or how hreflang annotations are useful for this particular scenario, because they will be able to point to the US page for these shoes effectively to be shown here instead of all of these other versions for other countries, right? So for that, I have also created a flowchart here to facilitate you to decide if it is worthy or not to use hreflang annotations in the first place. So, for example, you're not meant to use hreflang annotations if you have these pages only in a single language or country. So there's no purpose to use hreflang annotations, because the purpose there is to specify which are your alternate versions. If you don't have alternate versions, you shouldn't use hreflang annotations. Or I see a lot of people using them or pointing to pages that are not meant to be indexable anyway. If they are not meant to be indexable, there's no purpose for you to waste your time for those, right? So pages that have a meta-robust no index or are canonicalized to others or are redirecting, etc. Or another scenario is trying to implement hreflang annotations for every single URL or a very big website with millions of URLs, highly dynamic, that are changing all the time because maybe they are e-commerce ones, right? And in this particular case, it's about prioritizing which are the more static pages that generate issues again and again and again. And potentially this won't be the very highly dynamic product pages that are changing all the time and almost don't even have time to rank, or not necessarily the ones that are bringing traffic, right? So to do that, this type of analysis, which are the worthy pages that are actually ranking in the non-relevant market that you should prioritize to implement hreflang annotations to, you can use Semrush, for example, or your Google Search Console data or Google Analytics data to see which are the ones attracting traffic from pages from countries that they shouldn't be, because there are other pages meant to rank for these countries. And then I also created this Data Studio report to easily identify this. Applying certain filters is a step-by-step Google Data Studio that you can copy paste from this URL that I am leaving below. So you can literally see which are those pages that are actually meant to tag, right? And then, of course, for the values, you can use the hreflang tag generator here that is completely free. And realistically, if you use some of the most common CMSs out there, WordPress or Magento or Shopify, they also support automated hreflang implementation directly or with plugins or extensions. So this should be very straightforward also to configure and prioritize which are the pages that need hreflang annotations in the first place. And if you don't have this type of support, then you have the hreflang builder that is a pay tool, but it's very, very well worthy for enterprise level type of websites that will allow you to generate complex XML sitemaps with hreflang annotations in a very straightforward way. And finally, and the last classic scenario for SEO horror stories that will cause horrible nightmares are web releases and coordinating tests. And this is the thing, this requires a lot of really good coordination with the web development team. And this was very, very common. I literally just pick like the top ones, but leaving the test environments crawlable, to be crawl in general, is unfortunately still very common. one of the top things that I do when I start with a new SEO process. Like there's like asking like, is there a subdomain that you use for testing purposes, or do you have any open version of the website that is crawlable? And I go directly and check with Semrush through are there any subdomains out there beyond the www that it looks like a dev version, right, of the website. So yeah, unfortunately, it's still very common today, and literally there are so many ways to avoid this from happening. The best way though is, please don't rely only on the robots.txt on that subdomain, because we know that Google will tend to overlook it if they see that someone is linking to that page, unfortunately, and then the pages might be indexable because they try to replicate what they will see in the production environment, right? So the best is to rely on HTTP authentication and avoid any risk of human errors, then and also any third party or people outside your organization, that even your competitor, imagine, to see what will be the next release about. And then, of course, it's important that we monitor this very, very closely to avoid overriding the meta robots or canonical tags or robots.txt when we release to the live site. This is why before and after a release, it's important to test not only in the dev environment, but also after the release when it has been launched on the production one. Even if you have like literally tested this 10 minutes before on the dev one, check again, revise again, crawl again in the production one. Even if you have correctly sent the code, literally to be copy pasted by the developer. And this is a very funny case that SEO Bastian sent to me, saying like the craziest is like they change literally the disallow directive in the robots.txt just because the developer didn't copy paste it, but I don't know why they type it again, the directive, and they missed the slash. And yes, things didn't go well after that. So it's important to test this well. And then, of course, if there are any UX text happening, this is a good one from Arnaud, right? When you are doing any A/B or multivariate tests, be careful with the redirects. Be careful with the canonicalization or the no indexation of a few of these pages, right? Rachel Costello did a really, really good article covering the main scenarios of the configurations that can go wrong and how you can test that this doesn't happen when doing A/B and multivariate testing for within your organization, right? And then, of course, when someone asks to, because of analytics and testings and this type of scenarios, it's important to work not only with your web development team, but with your design UX team. If they want to track the user behavior, test the user behavior, there are always ways to do this in a way that doesn't mess up the SEO. So, for example, if they want to track internal links, don't use parameters. There are events. There are other type of methodologies that you can leverage that are integrated with an analytics tool that won't cause the mess that using UTM parameters will. And then, of course, again, another proof of why we need to align with other areas here, not only with the design and web development, but of course, link building. Someone was attracting tons of very, very valuable links, backlinks, and they were going to a page that was canonicalized to another one, the one to the agency that was working for the website. Imagine that should have happened. But again, anyway, these are nightmares that tend to arise from time to time. So it's very, very important to coordinate well, to align well with other teams, or also when cleaning up the site after being hacked, right? Oh, we are victims from spam or some hacking going on. What do we do in the meantime? We disallow so Google doesn't come and they see that we have been hacked. There are ways to handle this. Don't do this, right? Like try to remove, try to clean as soon as possible. Please don't block your website like this because yeah, of course you will stop ranking very quickly and all the effort that you have done will go to the garbage, I'm afraid. And finally, about aligning not only with the digital marketing team, but also and the design, but also even with the sales. This was very, very funny with Eagle, right? Last year we had an employee in sales who decided to run a test without telling, pure spam PPV campaign 30,000 users in one day before we noticed. So again, this I imagine that they run into a few very interesting cases here of scenarios for some stress testing their servers too. So this is a little bit of a technical SEO nightmare too. But in any case, the purpose here is that you see SEO as an integrated part within your company product triangle. And I developed this visualization that you see here on screen on an article a few months ago when I was analyzing and going through what needs to be next and how like my requirements, my recommendations align with all the features, functionality, efforts, business or sales efforts of the website, those that have more to do with technical challenges and technical requirements, those have to do with the business side of things, and those that are also in process already from all the marketing and growth areas, and how do we align each other to leverage every single opportunity and to know that what I am prioritizing makes also sense to other areas, how I can win and earn support from other areas, and that they are aware that I am doing this, and that I don't just overlook or even try to overlay what I am doing and end up everything or a good share of my effort to the garbage because of what they are doing is completely different or cover the same type of pages or will be applicable to the same type of pages, but in a completely different way, right? This is why a good alignment is important. And then what about the new technical SEO nightmares, right? So very typical one, very new one, very hot one, JavaScript frameworks. Things can really, really go wrong. And I got quite a few of this. So for example, the example here of Antoine, oh my God, complete drop of visibility here, as we can see, clients are rendering on a GS framework. Literally, this doesn't happen just purely by using client-side rendering. If the content that is renders fast, and if the content is relevant, and if the configuration is correct, and if the links are implemented following web standards, this shouldn't ideally happen. But we never know. We know that when you use JavaScript frameworks, things tend to take longer to load, and that is the problem. You need to be very, very fast. And if your website have millions of URLs, again, things can go wrong very, very quickly, right? So it is important to try to avoid as much as possible relying on JavaScript when you can very well use straightforward HTML, right? And of course, try to follow web standards as much as possible. Another horror story here from Pedro, literally with links that were not implemented with href tags, and of course, like no href values. How the Google bot will be able to crawl that, right? No way. And then, of course, it's thinking that you are doing it well, but you're not really doing it well as you thought, right? And here Barry was sharing his own scenario. A crawl without JavaScript rendering show 40K pages, but with 400K, right? And yeah, some very important on-page internal links were client-side JavaScript. And yeah, probably they didn't know or know. So here again, we can see how this crawlability type of issues, because I'm relying too much on JavaScript, can make or break. This is completely unnecessary in 2020. There are very well specified guidelines from Google at this point. I'm sharing a few guides on screen that are very well, that really go through the major scenarios and provide specific mechanisms to avoid this from happening with consideration from a web development perspective. And then there are also third-party guides, excellent ones. So for example, the one here from Barto's teams from Onely is really, really good with many studies and analysis going through the major JavaScript frameworks and the main issues that they do have. And there are also so many tools out there, even free ones. So for example, here, this one here from SearchView, they literally allows you to quickly check what is rendered using JavaScript or not, the gap from the raw HTML versus the render DOM. So you can see the gap in everything from every page, and you can do it so from a mobile and desktop perspective, the crawl too. And it tells you if the titles, meta descriptions, canonical tags, content links, what changes on the website from one or the other. And then also at this point, most SEO crawlers will also have the capacity of crawling with and without JavaScript, and then you can compare and see the gap. I love this feature from Sideball, for example, because they literally specify which are the links that you crawl with them that are whether created or changed with JavaScript. Right, so they check the difference between the DOM and the raw HTML, and it's so very handy because of how they've shown it for every page, and also at an aggregated basis with all of the links that they crawl, allowing to easily compare between crawls like this as I'm showing here. So it should be very, very straightforward. And then with the 9 more, finally, just to finish, wrapping up here, that we expect to come here. So here's an alert here to avoid from bad dreams coming, to be prepared, and we should be for at this point already, especially for the mobile first indexing, right? For which we have had a little bit of extra time, right? It was delayed already, and now it's finally going to happen in May 2021. Right, Google again in this case have done a really great work documenting what we should be doing as a best practice to avoid from bad things to happen, right? Like, and literally, it's pretty much on making sure that our website is crawlable to the mobile user agent on one hand, to the mobile Google bot, and then on the other hand, that we show the mobile Google bot all the content that we were showing to the desktop one, that our page is as relevant, right? And we don't miss or we don't eliminate stuff just because of to give them a faster experience of whatever, right? And they have been expanding their guides also with covering many additional use cases, right? So, for example, with lazy loading on mobile versions here, making sure how we display the images, that the images are actually crawlable here, that we're still linking these images, and if we rely on JavaScript to render them, to show them, etc., that we make sure that they are actually accessible, crawlable from the HTML, things like that. And then what it is important to realize is that this is not really a mobile first migration, but it's a mobile only migration. This is a clarification that John made a month ago or so at PubCon, when literally he mentioned, like, if you don't have the content on mobile, we won't take that into consideration. So it's not mobile first index. It doesn't matter that we don't have it on mobile because we still have it on desktop. So it's mobile first, but there's a desktop alternate like version still. So it should be okay. No, it is not okay, right? And here's the clarification that he made a month ago or so, saying it needs to be on mobile. It needs to be rendered in the render static HTML to be indexed, right? So it's a mobile only index in any case. So just to make sure, go to the Google Search Console, see which is the primary crawler that is being used for your website. Don't assume. Assumptions are the mother of fuck-ups. Is important. Don't assume. Go and take a look at the primary crawler, right? And we can see here that a few websites here might not have the mobile first still implemented. And here we can see Alibaba, for example. Oh my God, they are still having issues here. And then we can also crawl our websites in a very straightforward way here, using mobile and desktop crawling. And literally, there are so many tools out there. Literally, we can see here how this particular tool in technicalseo.com, this is the mobile first index tool. We can go and use it to validate the pages for free and see the gap between mobile and desktop in a very straightforward way. Another tool here that we can use to do this validation. And the idea is to avoid this completely. We should definitely avoid this because, again, assumptions are the mother of fuck-ups. These are websites that are already migrated. And the thing, we all know this, but this type of scenarios are not necessarily a knowledge issue, but an execution challenge, right? So how do we really avoid this? Talking with people and coordinating with people. this relies on people, as Arish very well said in this presentation here last year on Brighton SEO. So how to get support for the execution would involve stakeholders to avoid these SEO nightmares. Avoid fuck-ups by establishing a healthy SEO framework, right? SEO understanding across teams by doing trainings for the different areas involved in the SEO process, consistent SEO checklist to be used across teams whenever there's a change on the website. And I share a checklist here that you can use to implementing automated validations with the web platforms to follow SEO best practices as much as can be integrated directly within the platform. The best will be recurring ongoing SEO tech content manual validation pre and post web release with crawls, recurring ongoing SEO tech content automated validation pre-post releases with scheduled crawls too. Most of the tools allow us to do that too. Automated monitoring with alerts for technical configuration and content web changes. Content keying or little warden are amazing for this too. And as well as web ranking and traffic monitoring alerts too. So for example, right here provides these very, very handy alerts. And with Google Analytics and most run trackers. And to aggregate and summarize a little bit of everything, what I expect and I hope all the areas that should be doable to validate and to educate or to monitor, I did this healthy SEO framework that not only for the health of the website, but our own health as people too. This will minimize the scenarios for this type of fuck up. So hopefully it will help. I will be sharing all of this so you can start using it too. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope that I have covered most of those SEO nightmares of issues. I hope it is useful too, and looking forward to have a conversation about them now.
Thank you, Aleyda. That was really helpful. And you shared a few resources in the chat. Will they be on your Twitter feed?
They did. I will be sharing my deck right now, right after we finish the presentation now.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. So we've got some time for some questions, so I'm going to get right to it. I thought that was quite a fun one that I think Paul's got an answer to already. Simon Cox says, on the news today, a French news website moved CMS and published a set of draft obituaries of famous people. How do you recover from something like this?
Yeah, I think I was being a little bit cheeky. You know, that it's not you can get that removed from the index, right? You send it to a 404, or you try to get Google to crawl it. You make sure that that's not crawled again. You properly block that. You index it, you 301 it, whatever. You add a robots directive after you get it removed from the index, not before, because you don't want it to not be crawled before it's blocked. But then it's a PR situation. Like you have to handle that.
No, it's funny because literally, if you make use of the temporary content removal feature in the Google Search Console, that is handy when some content that shouldn't made available in the first place is made. That actually works very quick, I have to say. But imagine in this case, these were pre-made news of some people dying in some cases, right? It was about that. Imagine if someone, if they make use of this tool, if they just show up for 10 to get them out of the index. If someone's tomorrow dies, so they actually need to get that index right away. What a mess, right? Anyway, better to not get into that situation in any case.
The problem with those is the bigger the mess up, the quicker somebody is to take a screenshot.
Oh yeah, so. Absolutely. On a more serious note, we've got a nice question from Monica Wong. I'm going through a web migration. What metrics do I measure? A lot of these issues were migration related, weren't they?
Yes, indeed. Well, I think that it depends on the goal of the migration. This is the thing. The first question that I will ask when a migration is supposed to happen is like what do you want to achieve with the migration? Is the migration actually needed to achieve that goal that you want in the first place? Because yeah, let's try to actually make migrations happen when they are actually needed, right? This is the thing. And then on the other hand, of course, whatever, like for example, we need to consolidate brands, but we cannot lose the visibility that we had with our former brand. So it's important that we enable what I call the bridge page, right? That page where we clarify that we have rebranded, but that this page is still relevant for the former brand, so can still rank for it for a while, and things like that. So it's important to first to track and monitor this type of very particular KPIs because of the goal that we're trying to achieve for that particular migration. And then, of course, rankings, traffic, conversions, the URLs that were before and after crawl and index to I will say that the KPI should be at the different layers of the work, from a crawlability perspective, indexability, then those attracting traffic, attracting rankings, and of course the most important rankings for our most important queries or pages. We should see it. That is not only that we recover the traffic and that's it, but if the pages that are actually meant to be ranked and that were ranking before are the ones ranking now, right? That is not that we're like recovering the traffic from all the rankings of the pages, but the really meaningful queries for which we want to rank for are gone or are ranking with a wrong page, things like that.
Yeah.
And to add to that, I think it's worth asking the question of what kind of migration. Like there's actually like many types of migrations that can occur, right? You could simply be moving on to a new CMS, retaining all the same URLs. You could just be like redesigning the pages. It could be you could be moving on to new URLs, new
or
CMS.
It could be all of them.
There's many different forms, and sometimes the KPIs differ based on that. Like if it's simply like moving to like a new UI, then like you need to look at like engagement.
David, what do you think?
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned the various types of migration. The other issue is when it's businesses trying too hard to migrate everything at once. And so often I'm seeing that being a problem. It's kind of we're going to re-platform, so let's update the design. Hey, while we're doing that, let's change these category pages over here and update this. It just becomes too much. But I think the key really is with the metrics, get a really good snapshot of where you are at the moment. Because believe me, you're really going to need that if things get messed up later on.
That is a really, really good point, David. I have you can imagine how many times I have had to go to the Wayback Machine.
Yep.
Just to take a look, because I was involved not since the beginning, but when it was already a mess, when it was already released or something like that. It's like, oh, you didn't crawl taking a snapshot of every page. And now even with Screaming Frog, like every single tool nowadays allows you to take a snapshot of the render page, so we can see how it was. We can see how the main configuration of the main pages that were crawlable in the first place before were, and we can compare the before and after. That is something very, very important. And again, the different type of migration, this is very important to mention, right? I remember there was this case. It's like, we want to change the URL structure, but we also want to change the design and we want to change the navigation. So what do? We make all the changes at the same time, which has a risk? Or do we make every change like every month? That also is like, why don't we leave a little bit of more time to see the before and after, right? So again, try to avoid as much as possible too many things at the same time, because then it's much more difficult to isolate issues and see what has impacted what on one hand. And then on the other hand, please, if you are going to change many things, don't change every single thing like every second week or something like that. Like leave enough time to them to be recrawl and reassess. So yeah,
I mean that's something I've experienced quite a bit of, and it's the ability to understand where the mistakes are being made. And that's why having that gap between any major changes makes such a difference. But yeah, funny enough, I was on Wayback Machine today trying to solve various issues. It's always more interesting when you've been involved from a project from the beginning, but we don't often work like that.
Yes, definitely. And when you look at your Excel plan and you look at what they put live, and you're like, is this the
right client?
Nice. There's a good question from Dan Saunders. What would you recommend is the most important thing someone starting out in SEO should do / avoid to avoid these big SEO nightmares? Paul?
Yeah, so I know it's interesting. We talked about making use of of checklists. And those are certainly invaluable, whether they're, you know, a public-facing checklist or your own, you know, private checklist. But something I would be wary of is making sure that each item on that checklist is detailed enough and not in conflict with one another. I've seen so many issues come about because people are actually following checklists because maybe they haven't, just like, for example, they have an item like, make sure you have canonical tags, right? Okay, that's not good enough, right? Canonical tag can be in conflict with other directives. Maybe you want to direct a canonical tag at like another page. Just really think about how those different items are interacting with one another, and whether they reflect the full picture.
With checklists, it's critical to specify the scenarios and give examples. That makes a lot of difference, right? Because yeah, use canonical tags, but yes, to canonicalize where? To themselves, to others? When should I canonicalize to others? When to the page itself, right? And can you give me an example? Because that canonical, how do I implement that? Things like that. So as much as specific as you can be, the best that will be. Also, evangelization, internal education to the team. So I tend to give checklists after, as an outcome, after I have done a training. I do a lot of webinars with the web development and content team that will be involved with the SEO process, so they understand the impact, so they see the importance of this. And then after that, it's like, I will then send you the checklist now that you have the actual knowledge, right? And you know why is this about, or what it is about, right? So I think that these two things are very, very important. And the first things that I will do to avoid this from happening, right? Because that requires literally zero budget on tools or validation that are also important to do, for sure. But yeah, I think that understanding and good communication and support, and also like that, the web development team and the content team, they can think, oh, they are taking me into consideration. Ask them also when you do these trainings, like, what do you think that I should know about your work to, like, we connect together and coordinate well together. That is important.
I think the education really does go a long way, and that's something with a lot of the projects I work on. It's there from the very beginning. One of the other things is, you know, when you have one of these wonderful technical SEO issues, nightmares, it's important to have, you know, those checklists are great to fall back on, but the main thing is not to panic. You know, another issue is, I've seen this quite a few times, the technical SEO nightmare starts and then it just has this snowball effect. You have senior stakeholders screaming at SEOs, digital marketers, what on earth's going on, and panic sets in. And I think, you know, having some of those checklists in place, and just having the sense of mind not to go into a blind panic is quite vital with the technical SEO side.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've got time for one more question. I quite like this one, from Larissa Baker, or Backer, sorry. For the staging, would, instead of no indexing the pages, a 301 redirect for all bots also work?
So the 201 redirecting where? When it has become indexable, I imagine. Is that it? When the staging URLs have become already indexable, or
just in general stop it being visible? Maybe I'm gonna say that no is probably the answer from all of you.
Yeah, well, I say that
there's a lot of nuance there, right?
No, so this is the thing. Just to make sure that I understand well, the question is what that they are asking, if 200 it is okay to implement 201 redirects when the pages become indexable, just to eliminate them. So this is the thing. I wouldn't actually recommend to implement 301 redirects. Have you seen how much time does it take to take them out of the index after you actually migrate something and you want to get rid of them? So that, no, if you really want to, like, brute force those, I will actually make use of the tool from Google, the elimination of content from the index, or if that is not a possibility for you for some reason. The problem is that you want to, if it is your test environment, I mean, and you want to keep using a test environment or a dev environment because you need to test stuff, right? So you cannot use at 410 and on those pages, or show up 410 or that is, or maybe you want to migrate or take that environment or show that environment in another subdomain. That can be another way to start showing a 410, brute force everything, and show the dev environment in another one. But what I will do, and what I have actually gone through in a few cases, is I have made use of the tool from the Google Search Console that I forget the name right now. Is the removal tool, content removal. Request removal tool, that tool, and it's very fast, very effective for this type of scenarios.
Very.
You see, I interpret this as being as a preventative measure, like talking about using like user agent detection and having
interesting. Yeah. So to redirect the user agent to avoid crawling the dev environment and then showing a no index or something like that. That was it.
It's about redirecting just the Google bot, which I've always been told, don't do anything to the bot that you wouldn't do to users.
Well, but this is the thing. If you redirect, forget about that, because realistically, I mean, it's a dev environment that is not meant to be indexed in any case. So yeah, you can do whatever, but how will you crawl it then and test what it is published there for your own purposes? You won't be able to crawl it with a Google bot, but with your SEO tool or another Google bot, because that will be redirecting the whole time. So I will try, like, just request for authentication. HTTP access implemented one, like very straightforward, plus the robots.txt. That should be much more straightforward, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you, everybody that's posted your questions. I appreciate there's a lot that we've not got around to today, but thank you all. You can find all of us on Twitter, right, if we want to be chased down. Thank you, guys. Aleyda, your Twitter handle's there. Paul Shapiro's yours there. What's yours, David?
Oh, D says, so I'll put it in the comments.
It's there.
It's somewhere. I'll put it in there.
Feel free to chase us down and make sure that we answer all the questions that you've had, or just share with us your SEO nightmares, because we all have them. You'll be very gifted if you never go through an SEO nightmare.
Hopefully not tonight after this.
No, earlier today for me. This is late in the evening.